one thing we get wrong is people often talk about dopamine. It comes up a lot, and people really don't understand dopamine at all. Those are the big three, right? I mean, anxiety, depression, shame. Well, often it's not three, it's one. They go together. So then it's not just an absence of meaning. In a way, it's too much meaning, but it's the wrong kind of meaning.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay.
Okay. So then you want to change the meaning.
If you had the power to pass one universal law that everybody would obey and respect, what would that be?
Well, when it comes to addiction, stop punishing. Stop punishing. His famous quote that he also says on a TED Talk, which you should listen to if you haven't, is the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection, what you just said. Now, what does connection mean? Well, it's not so simple. How that kid feels during that day is going to depend on all those different concentric circles of environmental influence from on the outside, sexism and racism, let's say, and all the way into the family environment, all the way into what happens when your mom wakes you up in the morning and whether she's yelling at you or not.
Do you see any links between the type of pain that somebody feels and the substance or the thing they get addicted to?
Yeah, I do. I think it's fascinating. And people who want to feel safe, they choose opioids, usually. I mean, obviously, these are generalizations because opioids, their natural function in evolution, in our biology, is to help you feel safe or calm when you're under threat.
Do you believe that healing from whatever, may it be addiction or trauma or whatever, is possible without having the feeling of self-love?
That's a tough question.
Hello, dear friends. Thank you for being here for another episode of The Mind Architect in English. We are still in our conversation about addictions, and today we have a very special guest. We're having with us Dr. Marc Lewis. Marc is a neuroscientist and a psychologist. He taught developmental psychology at the University of Toronto for over 20 years and at Radboud University in the Netherlands for 6 years. He's the author and co-author of over 70 science articles in the field of psychology and neuroscience. And in his first book called The Memoirs of an Addicted Brain, published in 2011, he connects his own experience with drug use to an explanation of how the brain changes with addiction. In his second book called Biology of Desire, that you can find in English and now in Romanian also, Why Addiction is Not a Disease and How Neuroscience Can Set Us Free, it was published in 2015, he talks about the stories of people struggling with addiction and how the neuropsychological discoveries can help us improve, can help us heal, can help us on our healing journey. This episode is very interesting and I highly recommend watching until the end because we dive into concrete case studies, we talk about addiction in the brain, we talk about how different types of pain link to different types of addiction in adult life. We talk about Marc's personal healing journey and how he got addicted, why and what he did in order to overcome it. We talk about internal family systems, a therapeutic method that helped him a lot. And we talk about the fact that addiction is part of our life, is part of our culture, and it's important to understand our brains, our nervous systems, and also our psychology on the path to healing. Without making this introduction any longer, I invite you to discover a wonderful human being and a wonderful professional, Dr. Marc Lewis. Marc, thank you for being in the Mind Architect studio. Before we dive into the science, I'd invite you to speak a few words about your personal story and relationship with the topic of addiction so people who are seeing you maybe for the first time, even though you had a lot of appearances in this context, get a little bit of background.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, Paul. It's a pleasure to talk with you and to talk with your audience. My story is a long and complicated one. I'm pretty old now, and I know I look very young, but I've been through several lifetimes, you might want to say. And the first one that I was in a boarding school, and I was very unhappy, very depressed, bullying, all that kind of crap. And then came out of there, went to Berkeley, California, and the hippie movement. You started using a lot of drugs, especially psychedelics. That was the thing that was happening. It was fun. Felt like a cultural revolution, right? All that. That was great. But then I started using darker drugs, things like heroin, opioids, dangerous drugs, cocaine. And then I went into a real addiction for about, on and off for about 8 or 10 years. Moved back from California to Toronto. Fought my addiction for many years and finally beat it around the age of 30 and stopped using all drugs. Then I had been arrested and convicted for various things while I was using. Had to kind of get out of that stuff and come back to normal life, and went back to graduate school and got a PhD and became a professor in psychology. And I was a professor for 25 years and got married and had some kids and the usual sort of thing. Got divorced. Really several chapters.
Several lifetimes.
And the most recent one, I've been moving from academia, from being a professor into being a psychotherapist. So now I do a lot of actual psychotherapy with clients. I see about maybe, 20 to 30 people, sometimes 5-6 hours a day. So a lot of people I'm seeing who have all kinds of problems, including addiction. Not only, but including very often addiction, overlapping with depression, anxiety, and traumatic.
We're going to talk about
issues.
the therapeutic part, and thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Did your interest in this area of psychology and neuroscience get sparked by your personal experience?
Very much so.
Yep.
Yeah.
You wanted to understand better what was happening and why.
Yeah, so as a professor, I was teaching developmental psychology, child psychology, especially emotional development, emotion regulation, how kids learn to control or not control negative emotions. Then I got into the neuroscience and I opened up a lab and did a lot of brain recording research with kids, with their parents, before and after treatment, as they're growing up. We were videotaping these kids in interaction with their parents, but also looking at brain patterns, seeing if they change, and seeing how they differ. So anyway, after all that and thinking about the brain a lot, I decided to put together that part of my life together with the first part, the part in which I was using drugs a lot, and decided that the neuroscience of addiction was fascinating. So I spent quite a few years trying to understand what's going on in the brain when people are getting addicted to drugs. I wrote a couple of books that, one of them now published.
One of them is in Romanian. It's here with us,
Here
The
it
Biology
is.
of Desire, or in Romanian, Biologia Dorinței. Thank you for doing this
Of course.
also here.
You're welcome. That book has been very successful. It's now published in about 8 or 9 languages. So they want a second edition. And so, taking that stuff, but trying to take it out of the technical science realm and bring it to popular audience, trying to make the brain accessible.
That's what we're trying to do here.
Yes.
Speaking to that, so before we dive into more maybe complicated and therapeutic questions, I want to ask you, speaking both from your own experience and from your professional background, what do we currently get wrong about the neurobiology of addiction, and what are the necessary updates in understanding we need to make? I know it would take an hour or more to answer this extensively.
As I warned you, yes.
Yeah.
It is extremely complicated. They talk about the brain. They say it's the most complex object in the material universe, as far as we know. It's very, very complicated. You think of something even simple like an apple or a piano or whatever it is, some concept, and you do a brain recording, and what you see is stuff happening all over the place. Not in one place, but many, 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 many different places, which somehow get put together into your conscious perception, experience, feeling, reactions. So with addiction, which is already complicated, because you have some forces saying, I want to get high, I want to get relief, I want to get stoned, whatever. And you have other concepts, thoughts that you better not do that. This is very bad. You know you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Don't go there. So you've got very different signals coming at the same time. What's going on in the brain? A lot of stuff. One thing we get wrong is people often talk about dopamine. It comes up a lot. And people really don't understand dopamine at all. They think it's a pleasure chemical. It's not. It's one of the major neuromodulators, neurotransmitters, one of several. It has different functions in different regions. There are several different receptors. So you have one molecule. When it goes to receptor A, it causes an increase in excitement and drive. When it goes to receptor B, it causes the opposite. It causes inhibition and retreat, for example. But one thing we do know is that when you start using drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever it is that you start to get addicted to, once it becomes a target and a focal area for attention and desire, then the dopamine system gets tuned to that stuff. So next time you see, whether it's an ad for beer or whether it's, phone number of your drug dealer, or, a line of cocaine, there's a lot of dopamine system coming up. Once certain networks in the brain start to become tuned to that substance, to taking it, to calling the dealer, to going to the bar, to getting some money, to lying to your wife or your kids or whatever it is, once that starts to happen, the dopamine system is now fueling that stuff. And one of the main aspects of that is what we call craving. Craving is a big deal. Craving is another word for desire. But desire, we often think about as a romantic, lovely feeling. Desire is not so lovely when the thing you desire is not available, not legal, not allowed, or going to get you in a lot of trouble. Then desire doesn't feel good. It feels actually quite bad. I need it. I want it. I need to have it. That's desire. And dopamine fuels that approach behavior and focuses it and tunnels it, tunnel vision. So that's part of what's going on with the neurobiology, the actual neurochemistry in the brain. And then there are certain systems that are mostly activated. And one of the interesting things is that some of these systems, for example, something down here called the orbital frontal cortex, gets highly activated with drug addiction, but also with binge eating behavior and with anorexia. So there are other kinds of shall we say, strongly emotionally driven behaviors that can become compulsive, that become solidified by repeated activation, and then the dopamine system is fueling that and strengthening those connections, those synapses.
What would be then the difference between healthy learning and addictive learning?
I think the main difference is with healthy learning, you retain a lot of flexibility. You retain some capacity to be fluid, for the thoughts to move around, to make choices, to say, oh, maybe I'll look at it like this. Oh, I'm supposed to be learning the piano. I'm supposed to be learning C major and D major and G major and G minor and A minor, and I'm going to take a break, and go and play a video game. Well, that's healthy learning because you can move around. With addictive learning, you don't have that kind of flexibility. You have a sense of tunnel vision. Okay, so that and that can be a compulsive behavior like obsessive compulsive disorder. There's a lot of overlap. I think people might know what that is, OCD,
Yep.
Right? So when people compulsively wash their hands or whatever it is, it's a bit like that because you feel driven and you feel like you don't have a whole lot of choice. So that's learning, but it's learning to do the same thing over and over again. And when that happens, you're using less of the prefrontal cortex, executive, higher order, thoughtful, decision-making, choices, perspective-taking, less and less and less, and more you're using other circuits back here in the motor part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, so to speak. Which
would be the striatum, probably?
Yes,
Yep.
which would be the striatum,
Yep.
yeah. The striatum is this old system that's been around for 250 million years, and it's how we get things done. It's how mammals do things.
And is responsible both for the drive the emotional drive
Yeah.
and the motor part of it, the habitual.
Exactly.
Okay,
So-
ventral and dorsal.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Thank you. We're trying to
got
get
it.
this to the people, and thank you for your explanations. I watched several of your speeches, and I understood.
You got it. Okay.
this
I'm
part.
glad you
And
did.
first, so
And by the way, that's very much linked to the amygdala, which we often talk about. People think about the amygdala.
fear and threat assessment.
Not only fear.
How does it participate?
The thing about the amygdala is it fires very rapidly and it's highly programmable. Okay? So that means when you're, 15, 16, 17, 18, whenever you start to use certain drugs or habits or whatever it is, the amygdala is now programming, oh, that's the thing that's important right now. Can I get it? Do I get it? How do I hide it? Stuff like that. And it's really hard to change that programming.
So it participates in assigning value?
Yes,
Okay.
very much so. And it's rapid. And that's a big deal because the prefrontal cortex takes a little bit of time to think about things, so to speak, right?
While the amygdala is...
The amygdala is already, boom.
Flash. Boom.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's desire, aversion, wanting, and fearing.
Okay. And I want to ask something because there are a lot of parents who are watching, and maybe most of us have tried one time or another either an illegal substance or something like that. What's the difference between, for example, I don't know, smoking weed at a party when you're at the seaside or when you're having fun, as opposed to getting addicted to that? What's the difference? Is it the frequency of use? How is it that some people are able to use it from time to time and not get addicted, while other people, it's been said this idea that some people, when they first consume something, maybe alcohol or cocaine or something, they found their drug. It's like their brain and their entire biology says this is it.
You hear these stories, but it's not that common.
Okay.
Usually addiction takes a little bit of time to settle in because part of it is frequency and repetition. And one thing we do know about the brain is this expression, what fires together wires together. Right? So that means that the neurons that are firing together, connecting up in a configuration, in a pattern, in a network, the more they're firing together, the stronger the linkages become from among those neurons.
Which is good. It's how we learn, basically.
It's how we learn everything.
Yeah.
But however, that tightening, that solidification, if it's about the fact that cocaine is the only way I'm going to feel good, then it's not so good, right? So what makes the difference? Smoking weed on the weekends? Well, I've got two 19-year-old boys, my twin boys, who are doing very well.
Twins.
And however, they do indeed smoke weed, mostly on the weekends, I hope, but sometimes more often than that. They drink, but they don't drink every night, certainly, and they don't drink huge amounts. They're not barfing. They're not, falling down. Frequency is one way to, so to speak, measure it. Another way is if you say, let's not do that tonight. Let's do something else. If you're addicted, you're going to say, no, we want to get high tonight. Then we can do the other thing. If you're not feeling that way, if you're not feeling addicted, then you can say, okay, maybe so.
I heard this definition in some of Andrew Huberman's podcasts. It came to mind when you were saying that he defined addiction as a progressive narrowing of the things that give you pleasure.
Yep.
It makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
It speaks to what you were saying.
Narrowing.
So frequency is one thing. Intensity of the substance probably is another one, because from what I know, cocaine raises your dopamine level something like 1,000% in the first 10 seconds of consumption, which is not something that other things... Huberman said that he gave a hierarchy of things that raise phasic dopamine levels.
Yeah.
And he said that cocaine is 1,000% in the first 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Compared to anything else, eating, lovemaking, I don't know, smoking, nothing gives you that. Does that play into why we get addicted to some things other than frequency?
So what that probably feels like is excitement, right? And of course, you also feel excitement when you're falling in love, when you're about to have sex or something else, or watch a great movie, whatever it is. With cocaine, that rapid rise in excitement, it's a big deal. But it's not just the effect of the drug. That's a minor part of it. The major part of it is, oh, this is my thing. I get to have some now. I've been waiting for this. I finally got enough money. I finally found a good dealer. I finally found good quality cocaine. So it's not just the drug itself. It's the meaning of the drug that's giving you that, most of that chemical response and most of the feeling response that goes with it. That make sense?
Yep, the meaning of it. And would you say, even from personal experience, that the less connection we have, the less meaning we have in our lives, the more sensitive we are to becoming addicted?
Yeah, I would say that. But it's not, I mean, that's a very hard thing to talk about meaning, of course, right? What does meaning mean? So
some people have spent their lives
I know.
trying to...
I know.
Right?
Well, I try to avoid philosophy. I find it too complicated.
Okay, you being a neuroscientist and a psychotherapist.
Yeah, but still. Also too abstract. You can spend a lot of time with definitions, and I don't care too much about definitions. As far as meaning, it's not just absence of meaning. Absence of meaning can be a great thing if you're meditating and you're feeling a lot of calm and peacefulness, and sometimes a kind of like, I'm just here, just now in my body, or I'm noticing this beautiful forest or sunset or building or piece of art. There's not a lot going on, maybe, but that's not a problem. However, if you're feeling lousy, and it's that simple, if you're just not feeling good, you're feeling unhappy, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling, I don't know how to connect with people, I'm not a very good person, which means you're also feeling shame. Those are the big three, right? I mean, anxiety, depression, shame, well, often it's not three, it's one, they go together. So then it's not just an absence of meaning. In a way, it's too much meaning, but it's the wrong kind of meaning.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay.
Okay. So then you want to change the meaning. You want to say, I don't like this feeling of being feeling unsafe, unhappy. I don't belong in this world. I don't know how to make it better. I want to replace that meaning with another meaning. That is the meaning that I get from cocaine or heroin or opiates or cannabis, whatever it is. Oh, this is my friend. Now I feel better. Now I feel comfortable. Now I feel I have what I need to settle down, relax, be present. That's a different kind of meaning. So you're replacing one with another.
And would you say it's a replacement of meaning or of feeling, of how you feel in the present moment? Or is it something more sustainable, like I see the world differently, I have a different lens?
Well, I wouldn't say those are different things.
Okay.
Like meaning and emotion go together, right? I think. I mean, you can't have meaning without some kind of emotion, even if it's just interest, curiosity, or like that. But the kinds of meaning that go with anxiety, shame, anger, fear, sadness, that can be the immediate meaning, like I think you probably don't like me because I'm not a very good person, and you probably know that I'm not a very good person. So that's an immediate meaning of the moment, which goes with these feelings. But I think I'm generally not a good person. So when I go out of this room and go back into my life and go to a hotel tonight, I'm not going to have a good time because I'm not a very good person and no one's going to like me. Then you have that meaning extended over time. And then you have those emotions extended over time, which we often call mood, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, depression and anxiety, those are really moods.
Mood disorder.
Yeah, can be. Or they can be quick and dirty, but they can also last a long time.
Thank you for explaining this. I want to ask you something that I also addressed with Gabor a little bit in our conversation. How much do you believe genes play into predisposition to addiction, into what we get addicted specifically to?
So, yeah, that's a big question. People talk about it a lot. I don't totally agree with him. He says that genes have a lot of impact. They do in a way, but not exactly the way that I think he thinks. Because he's talking about if you are more of an introvert, more shy, more kind of like I don't want to talk to people because I'm concerned. I want to, like that. Then you are more likely to become addicted. True. But it's also the opposite is also true. If you're more of a risk taker, extrovert, I want excitement. I want to have fun. I want to do stuff. I'm bored. That kind of opposite personality trait also makes you more likely to become addicted. I know this because of the statistics and also because that's me.
On what the part of the spectrum?
I'm both, really.
You're both. Sometimes introverted, sometimes extrovert, ambivert.
Which is sort of the problem with these trait definitions, and partly why I like the kind of therapy that recognizes that we have very, very different parts of ourselves.
We're going to get into that because it's of interest to the people also.
Yes.
So would you say, just staying one more minute on this, so Gabor says that genes raise your sensitivity to becoming addicted. They are not a sentence, and they're not in any way, if you have these genes, you're going to get addicted to this.
For sure, yes.
So this is what we agree on.
We totally agree on that. Genes are important in all kinds of ways, but and we do agree on this. It is not there's never an addictive gene.
Okay.
That's a complete fairy tale.
Looking at the people. It's important to line this out because in Romania, people are still looking at people who suffer from addiction as, to some extent, that they choose to do that, that it's a problem of willpower.
Yeah.
And what would be your thoughts on that? Is it about willpower in any way?
So that's a somewhat different question. It's related to genes because genes cause what we call predetermined. So they provide tendencies. You're more likely to do this, more likely to be introverted or extroverted or whatever it is, or social or antisocial or depressive or dependent and blah, blah, blah. So those are all of those things matter. None of those things are carved in stone, life sentence. They don't determine whether or not you become addiction. So then the whole other part of the story, which is the biggest part of the story, is environment. And he and I certainly agree on that. And when you say environment, it means everything from not only from birth, but as he often emphasizes, from before birth, because the mother's nervous system, if she is stressed and overworked and tired and exhausted and depressed and anxious, whatever, then the fetus is going to, the actual development of the fetal brain is going to be affected by that stuff. So that matters. It all matters. And the home atmosphere matters, and having siblings matters, and how the siblings treat you, if they're mean to you, if they're bullying you, or if you're bullying them, or if whatever, the parents show too much favoritism. And, there's always going to be some kind of favoritism in some ways. Different kids.
Even when you have twins.
I love them both a lot, and I don't compare the amount of love, but they're different people. So in a way, I love different things about each one. But all of that stuff is environment. It's all this. So the environment, of course, it means many things. It means the social and economic environment, how much money there is, if there's enough, if both parents have to work, or one parent, or no parents. All that stuff, the quality of the school, racism, poverty, sexism, all of that goes into environment. And it's all very, very important, because if you go and look at the way the bigger picture affects the smaller picture, affects the family, affects the day-to-day life of the child, the impact is huge. How that kid feels during that day is going to depend on all those different concentric circles of environmental influence, from on the outside, sexism and racism, let's say, and all the way into the family environment, all the way into what happens when your mom wakes you up in the morning and whether she's yelling at you or not. It all matters.
That gives a very interesting and broad perspective on it, and I want to thank you for doing that, because it shows us that addiction is not something you address specifically with, one type of intervention. Is the whole ecosystem, is the entire culture we live in, the family we live in, the social and economical
very much so
environment. For the people who hearing this say, okay, then I'm doomed because I live in, I live in a bad economical context. I live in a country that doesn't, do this or that. Do you see a hierarchy of importance in what parents or people who are watching, if they have kids, and they'd like to get things right, the most important things right in childhood that in a way insulate or predispose a child to have lower sensitivity to addiction? What would those be?
Yeah, so you're right that all of those factors could mount up. There's something else called resilience sometimes, or some kind of protection or buffer against these pathways of addiction. Well, the most important thing, and Gabor also, and I agree with him very much about the impact of loneliness. Loneliness is huge. And feeling alone, it's not just about being alone, it's about feeling alone, means that you do not feel good. Because as he also emphasizes, we are meant to connect with each other, that the human mind, the social brain, is designed by evolution to connect and to be part of a family, a system, a group. So the most important thing parents can do is help their kids not feel alone. What does that mean? Does that mean you have to always be there, sitting there and, watching over them and talking? No, it doesn't, because that's going to be way too much. Give them some flexibility, let them come and let them go. But the most important thing is to let them feel understood. So if they can feel that their feelings are not crazy, their feelings make sense, their feelings belong, their feelings can be understood by someone that they love and trust, their parents, even those feelings of anger, even feelings of alienation, isolation, depression, it feels really crappy, doesn't it? I know. And do you want to be alone for a while? Do you want a hug? That kind of closeness and kind of acceptance, I think, is the most important thing parents can do.
Okay. Anything on top of that, or anything you'd like to add? I'm curious. I'm going to ask you something specifically. How much movement? How much does movement play into this? And I'm asking because, for example, Peter Levine's work talks about the fact that trauma is more easily installed when you're immobilized, when you don't move. So the way that mammals throughout their evolution used to let stress go was from shivering, moving, confronting, or running away from that. And we live in a culture where kids stay a lot on smartphones or stay a lot indoors. They don't go outside as much. And that's a really practical thing. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Does it raise the chances, if you're a parent who's not educated in terms of psychology or doesn't understand these things, but has the opportunity, they live in a village and has the opportunity to let the child go outside and play and be in connection to nature and move, would that build resilience?
Sure. Yeah? That's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, I think it's obvious, but maybe it's not obvious to everybody. But being outside is really, really important, and really, because the inside world is already so highly defined. This is that, this is my game, this is my homework, whatever, this is my desk, this is my bed. When everything's so highly defined, you don't have a lot of variability in your environment that you can find different parts of yourself to connect with. But as soon as you're outside, whether it's the weather, whether it might rain, it might not rain, whether you're playing football, whether you get the ball or whether you don't get the ball, whether you're climbing a tree, whether it's hard, whether it's easy, whether you fall down and have to get up, all of those things allow you to be more of the different ways that you can be. It builds strength, it builds confidence, builds a sense of, I live in this world, all of these different aspects of the world. I'm at home here. I can function.
So connection, movement. Especially for the developing brain, is sleep important?
Especially in adolescence.
Yeah. Okay, when they get very few of it, very little of it because of screens and stuff.
Yeah, well, so that's a big deal, especially, in the teenage years. So my wife of 28 years, Isabella Granick, has done a lot of work on looking at adolescents and their development and their education. And she has a wonderful program, by the way, which you should Google.
Please.
It's called Liminal Learning. Liminal Learning. And her name is Isabella Granick. Isabella with one L. And guess what? She's Romanian.
Really?
She's born here.
Where was she born?
In Bucharest.
Wow.
But she moved, not by herself, with her parents when she was 4 years of age. And they went to Italy. They escaped from the Ceausescu years, and they ended up in Canada. And her father worked his way up in telecommunications, blah, blah, blah. And she's very much a Canadian. But I heard a lot of Romanian when we were together from her parents.
Okay.
Mostly they were arguing, so I didn't have to pay attention. But
Okay.
Anyway, but the point is, her program is very much about allowing kids to connect their creative, spontaneous perceptions of the world with knowledge, with building up a knowledge structure. Not one that's handed down by teachers, but one that they can connect and build with each other. So it's about cooperative building of knowledge structures that continue to allow novelty and spontaneous experience enter into it. Left brain, right brain is how they talk about it. Left brain is about conceptualization. Right brain is about perception, spontaneous, what's going on, putting them together. There's a lot to be said about that. But anyway, it's a really cool program for kids 18 to 22 years of age, because those are very important formative years. Kids often say, now what do I do? To finish high school, now what do I do? Well, I guess I have to go to university. Oh, what do I take? Well, I guess, I don't know, I'll take economics, business, And then, they get a job in a corporation and they get bored and
they feel bad.
They feel bad, and then they burn out, and then they take a lot of cocaine. And that's that story. Anyway. So, liminal learning, check it out. Liminal learning. But the bigger picture you asked about sleep and the general health, adolescent health, it's a challenge. Adolescents are challenging. We know this, right?
Absolutely.
But they're also wonderful. They're fascinating. They're interesting. They're fun. They're energetic. They're full of life. And often they're very funny. So, and they know it. So, yeah, get them to sleep. To the simple answer to that question. They need to sleep at night. And sometimes that means you need to turn off everything.
All screens.
I'll turn off the screens, at whatever, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, whatever it is. If you have to do it, try to do it gently, try to do it cooperatively. One way or another, they do need to sleep at night. Everything is going to be better.
Speaking, thank you for sharing the fact that you have 2 boys and twins and 19. What are your concerns, but also practices that you care a lot about as a family in order to help them develop optimally, but also to shelter them from addiction?
Yeah, well, of course, there's a lot of stuff about family life. It's quite complicated, but you try to be there. You try to listen and be aware. You try to understand what they're going through. One of my sons recently told me, Papa, I've been a bit depressed for the last year. I said, Julian, I didn't know that. Why did you tell us? He said, well, because I knew how to hide it. I said, wow, how could I not know that? I'm his father. I love him. So how did I miss that? Maybe I should have tuned in more, just been more aware of what is he doing when he's quiet? Well, he spends a lot of time on TikTok. Maybe that's a clue. Okay. Anyway, all of that stuff. But when it comes to drugs, I think the most important thing is you have to be sensible and not be an idiot the way you talk to your kids about drugs. If you say never use drugs, they're just not going to listen to you, right? Because they're going to use drugs. I mean, most of them, 90%. Yep. And the 10% who never do actually have some disadvantages in development.
Really?
Yes, really.
How come?
Because as far as I understand it, the research shows that kids who don't experiment at all with substances, drugs, alcohol at all, they're too rigid.
Okay.
They're too controlled, over-controlled. Okay, so a little bit of exploration is natural. In adolescence, it's more than natural. It's
in adolescence. 15, 19,
yeah, it's essential.
Okay. Not before?
I mean, they'll explore other things before, but hopefully not drugs, right?
Okay.
But when they're in adolescence, in the era that we live in, a lot of that exploration has to do with mental states and social states and getting high and having fun. All okay if it's exploration. But once you start to use something all the time by necessity, because that's the only thing that makes you feel good, then it's not good. Then it's not okay. So how do you talk to your kids about drugs? Be realistic. You can say, I really don't want you to ever take cocaine because it's very addictive and it's very expensive and it's the consequences are pretty serious. And don't ever take fentanyl, ever, 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 because it can kill you. And stuff like that. That's realistic. That's good education. If you say don't ever smoke cannabis, they're just not going to listen to you. So choose your words carefully and be realistic, and then they will respect what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you for saying that and for sharing that, because I believe that a lot of parents are still in the mindset of prohibiting, trying to control everything, and obviously that doesn't work, especially in the world where we live in.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something that I know is of interest to you and to me and probably to a lot of people in the audience. Do you see any links between the type of pain that somebody feels and the substance or the thing they get addicted to?
Yeah, I do. I think it's fascinating. I don't think we know a lot about that. But I've got a couple of my patients, my psychotherapy patients, who have a serious cocaine problem.
Okay.
What are they looking for? Well, excitement,
energy.
But they're also looking for power, for strength, because they feel weak, because they feel dissolved, they feel spread out and chaotic, and they need focus. They want to have that sense of clarity and focus. So because that's what they want, I think cocaine is a choice for them. Other people, other kids who need to feel safe because they feel the world is a dangerous place. That was me growing up, because I went to this boarding school and it was not safe, and I was 1,000 miles from my home, and there was bullying going on, and it wasn't fun. I had to learn how to fight. So for me, it was about safety. And people who want to feel safe, they choose opioids, usually. I mean, obviously, these are generalizations, because opioids, their natural function in evolution, in our biology, is to help you feel safe or calm when you're under threat. To relax you so that you can cope, so that you're not freezing up, so that you're not going rigid or being frozen with fear. They help to reduce sympathetic activation. The autonomic nervous system calms it down, of course, and provides you with a feeling of, well, opiates do a lot of things. They also help you connect. Which is something people don't usually understand, but it's actually true that when you give mice or rats opiates, they have more fun together. They actually tickle each other more.
Yep.
They tickle each other. They also have sex more, but because opioids make them feel, I suppose, less at risk. And that's what opioids do.
And when we say opioids, what are the substances, the drugs, the things that give you this?
So classically it was heroin, but heroin is going down in use in the Western world, partly because it's being replaced by fentanyl, which is a much cheaper synthetic opioid. Very, very powerful. It has many different analogs, fentanyl, molecules that are related to fentanyl. Some of them are 10 to 50 times stronger than heroin. Yeah. So you can take a tiny, tiny amount and die. Boom, like that. And that's why it's so, so very dangerous, because, of course, the dealers and the supply chain is not necessarily regulating things very, very finely. So, So, sorry, your question was about opioids?
What other substances or what other things tap into the opioid system?
So there's a lot of pharmaceuticals. Oxycodone is a big one, or OxyContin, as it's sometimes called, when it's, more packed, slow release, and people often crush it up and they might snort it. So there's oxycodone, there's hydromorphone, there's Dilaudid, that's another name for it. There's these various pills. There's what's it called? I can't remember the name. But pharmaceutical painkillers are often opioids as well. And there's a lot of market for them because they are more regulated. You know what you're getting, you know how much you're getting. They tend to be expensive and they make you feel good.
Is cannabis part of this?
No.
It's a different
Yep.
class. What does it do? Who do
What
you
does it
see
do?
predisposed? Speaking about the type of pain and the type of substance or addiction we're predisposed
So-
to, you talked about cocaine, opioids.
So cannabis, like alcohol, has many different, shall we say, personalities to it. Okay, alcohol can make you feel relaxed. It can also make you feel energetic, more social, more okay by yourself. Same with cannabis. It can have different kinds of feelings depending on the context. What cannabis does is it activates cannabinoid receptors. Well, they're called cannabinoid receptors because cannabis activates them. So they're related to very complex neurotransmitter chains, including the what's it called? Well, some dopamine, some norepinephrine, but also especially the name is now slipping my mind.
Acetylcholine?
Thank you. Yes.
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not.
Not that one? For focus?
Yeah.
I know that nicotine
the
activates
cholinergic
that.
system.
The cholinergic system.
Exactly.
Okay.
Acetylcholine. Yeah, you're right. You got it. So that is related. Also, smoking, tobacco also activates cholinergic receptors. So they're really complex, and I don't understand them very well myself. But some of them are down in the brainstem, and they have to do with like pure awareness. They sort of focus you a little more. But cannabis, also. Makes your mind wander in all kinds of interesting ways. You become more poetic, more
Integrative.
integrative, but also diversified. So thoughts can go off in different directions. So they also have psychedelic properties. And you can say that's a psychedelic thing, where thoughts and feelings continue to emerge outward, continue to ramify, amplify. And sometimes that makes it, oh, what was I talking about? What was I thinking about? Oh, yeah, but this is really important. Oh, and that I love that kind of music. And yeah, no, play that again.
Would you say from your therapy practice or maybe from your personal experience with it that it helps people who are too rigid? Did you see this? People who are rigid, who are too much focused, having a tendency to use cannabis more?
Good question. I don't know. Not necessarily, because if you're more rigid, then you're probably going to get more self-conscious and nervous when you smoke weed. Okay, so maybe you don't want to go there.
Okay.
Rigid usually means over-controlled. And cannabis means you're going to be under-controlled. So that might not be fun for you.
Okay. Indeed. Okay. How about alcohol? What does it do in the brain, and why do so many people, in your opinion, go for it?
Mostly because it's available. I mean, as far as shall we say, the quality of the high, alcohol is not terrific, right?
You feel horrible afterwards, usually.
You feel excited and nice for the first half hour, and then it starts to go down, and you have a couple more drinks because you try to get it back, but you don't quite get it back, and then you get more and more sleepy and stupid and all that. We know about that, and we know how you feel the next morning. However, it's legal, it's acceptable, it's socially can be cool in many contexts. Let's have a drink. Drinks can be fun, they can be flavorful, they can be shared. You're not going to share oxycodone, right? But you can share drinks. So that's one reason. Another reason is because alcohol, they say it's a very simple molecule with very complex effects. It's true. And so part of it, they call it a social lubricant, right? Which means it's easier to get along. Why? Because it calms you down. Why does it calm you down? Well, partly because it initiates the GABA system, the inhibitory neurotransmitters. So you get more of a overall blanketing effect, which means less likely to get nervous.
It's overall, it's not just in the prefrontal areas.
No, it's overall.
Overall.
That's right.
Okay.
So too much also you're stumbling. Right?
Motor area.
Right, motor areas, and your speech starts blah, blah, blah. Yes.
And you can't see straight.
If you take a lot, yes.
Okay.
That's right. So GABA, yeah.
All over the brain.
All over the place. But if you're in social situations, which are always, often, to some degree, anxiety-provoking, did I say the right thing? Was that the wrong thing? I want to get it on with this girl, this boy. So was that Is that good? What I said? Do I look like an idiot? All of that stuff now is calmed down by the alcohol. So that's one reason why it's attractive.
It's very interesting to me because I want to ask you a technical thing. Does it also tap in any way to the opioid system?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a painkiller because I see people who are a lot in pain, emotional or physical, drinking. So I get the GABA part.
So yeah, a lot of these drugs will target one particular system and receptor type, but the effect spreads and spreads and spreads because neurons are connected to other neurons. Many. I mean, every neuron has anywhere from 10 to 1,000 connections to other neurons. It's a huge amount of complexity, which means the streams of activation can go in many directions, which means something that initially is activating the GABA system.
Yep.
Well, GABA is inhibitory, right? But sometimes what you're doing is inhibiting inhibition. Double inhibition means excitation. So you get more energetic and more risk-taking and stupid. And as far as pain relief, yes, it does. For some reason, it also seems to activate the endogenous opioid system, the opioid receptors, which Gabor calls endorphins, and it's a good word for it, endorphins. Yeah, we create them in our brain and all over the body, yes. But they can get activated by all kinds of things. They get activated by feeling good.
Laughing, crying,
loving, being loved. Well, mother's milk contains opioids. So that means your opioid, when you're a baby, your opioid system is saying, oh, this is nice.
Uh-huh. So what I'm understanding from what you're describing is that we have these receptors and we have these neurochemicals that are part of us.
Yeah.
But in certain environments and contexts, we overuse them to the extent that they get automated.
Yeah.
They narrow pleasure, they narrow our focus so that we're looking for those things in particular and not anything else that would give that. And that's basically the problem and how addiction sets in.
Yeah, yes, except I would make one change. I would say it's not that they get overactivated, it's that you get overactivated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not that they are now pushing you or pulling you or forcing you, because there's a lot of decision-making and preference and targeting going on. Oh, this is what I want. This is what I like. This is what I need. That's huge. That's amazing. That's all over the brain. It's happening. Right? That has to do with what you fear and what you like and what makes you feel safe, what's familiar. I trust drugs. Drugs are good to me. I know what I'm doing when I take a drug. I don't know what I'm doing when I try to get it on with a sexual partner. That's dangerous. Drugs, I know what I'm getting. Well, so that's not a brain thing. That's a person thing.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about this, now in the first part of our talk, we covered a little bit about the neurobiology and what happens and what they do and the different types of them. In your personal experience, how did the healing journey or the recovery journey look like? And what would be the first steps for somebody who watching us or watching this series that we've done on addiction says, okay, I see, I might have a problem here. Yeah. What do I do?
First thing, stop thinking about it as a disease. It's not a disease. The whole idea that it's a disease, it's a chronic relapsing brain disease, it's stupid, it's old-fashioned. There's more and more people now that are arguing against that claim. And my book, this book that's now translated in Romanian, this one right here, has a lot of that argument in it. In English, I'm not sure about in Romanian. The subtitle is Why Addiction... Why makes you fall over?
It makes you fall over, yeah.
Why addiction is not a disease. So that's a big part of my argument, but I'm not the only one. So second of all, instead of thinking about addiction as being a chronic thing that relapses, oh my God, he's done it again, he's back to zero. No, you're never back to zero. And even though I stopped doing all drugs for a long time, I started again at various times, partly because I had a number of surgeries. I had some spinal surgeries. I had a lot of pain. So taking oxycodone for the pain. And I thought, oh, this is nice. I like this feeling. I remember this feeling. This is great. So then I took it for some extra months, and then I stopped. Well, I can stop now because I'm more grown up, because my world is bigger, because I have more control, because I have more insight. When I was 22, not so easy. So it's not that you're just back to where you were. It's not that you relapse back to zero or something, which is what they say in AA. It's a problem. I don't believe that. I think in many ways you can revisit, you can try again, whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs, and you will find that the experience is going to be different and how it fits into your life is going to be different, and it might be temporary. And by the way, I would say close to half the people I know, clients and friends, are taking antidepressants, SSRIs. Mm-hmm. There's not a big difference between taking SSRIs and taking illicit drugs. Some you get from the doctor, some you get from the dealer. They're both to make you feel better. Mm-hmm. So the idea that drug use itself is somehow evil, sick, dangerous, you're falling off a cliff again, oh my God, it's overkill. It's a cultural myth.
Okay.
And that's not what people who become addiction. Yeah, it's a really big problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem. But there's such a thing as addiction that continues to build on itself and gets worse and worse and worse because you have no idea how to control it. You're alone. You don't have the kind of support that you need to help you. There's a big difference between that and using drugs in some way temporarily for some purpose or other.
Okay. So not looking at it as a disease, not looking at relapse as something that gives you back to square one, to zero.
Yes.
What else could they do or should they do? Or if you want to share from your experience, how did the journey look for you? Can they do it by themselves? Do they need to go to therapy? I don't know.
I mean, the journey for me was very complicated for all kinds of reasons. But in my 20s, when I was trying to quit opioids because I was taking very dangerous opioids in very dangerous ways and doing some crime and getting in all kinds of trouble, I remember one time I went to a psychiatrist, I think a psychologist, I think a psychiatrist, and I said, I really need help. And they said to me, oh, well, when you stop doing drugs, you can come here for therapy. I said, come on, really? Why do you think I'm here? So it's sometimes therapy is very useful. I think often therapy can be very useful if you find the right fit, the right type of therapy, and so forth. I think internal family systems, what I practice, IFS, I practice it because I think it works very well. But also compassionate inquiry, CI, is obviously a very powerful method as well for helping people with addiction. So that's one way to help. Another way is also give the person a little bit of space to help them find a way to heal themselves, to fix themselves. Don't tell them what to do. Don't tell them they're an idiot or worse, that they're a horrible, weak-willed, shameful person, because that's not going to help. Give them some room in their life and in their self-concept so they can find a way out, because there's not only one way out. There's many different ways out for different people. Some people do it better alone. Some people do it better with a therapist. Some people do it better by falling in love and reconnecting with other people intimately or with family. Some people might be better off spending a couple of months in the forest. Very different ways to get out of addiction.
How can somebody discern whether they should be alone, or how should somebody discern whether they should give somebody space or be there for them? Because earlier we were talking about the importance of connection, and in the conference that you spoke at Reconnect in Bucharest, it was discussed that addiction is basically the psychological antonym of connection.
Yes.
So how can they discern space or connection or both?
So right. So these are the famous words of Johann Hari, which I
Lost Connections.
Yeah. And his first book, Chasing the Scream, beautiful book, really, really important book about the war on drugs and how it failed time after time after time, just like prohibition failed. Prohibition of alcohol back in the 20s and 30s. Okay, so he makes that point very, very well. But his famous quote that he also says on a TED Talk, which you should listen to if you haven't, is the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection, what you just said. Now, what does connection mean? Well, it's not so simple. Connection, be there, be available, be able to listen, be able to understand. But it doesn't mean you need to crowd the person. It doesn't mean you have to be, surrounding them with your idea about how they need to get better. Connection can mean giving them space to find their way. That's also connection, is respecting them enough to trust them, to get them well enough to see their strength as well as their weakness.
Thank you for that. I'd also be curious, what are the circumstances in which we are more predisposed in relapsing? Is it being tired, being stressed, and why? I'm curious about why those are the moments when we're more predisposed in getting back to the habit.
Definitely. Depression and anxiety are the big ones. I mean, that's what we call it when people feel crappy. They feel crappy either more tending towards, I'm a terrible person, I'm bad, you want to shrink. Shame is part of depression, a big part of depression. Anxiety, they're not two different things. They're overlapping. They often go together, right? But anxiety is more about feeling scared about, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm going to fail. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my marriage. I'm going to whatever. So those are when those feelings, those packages of feelings become activated or intensified, are obviously when we are most likely to start to use drugs. And it's pretty obvious and pretty simple. That's when you go to the doctor and get your antidepressants or your anti-anxiety drugs, whether it's SSRIs, whether it's Prozac or Zoloft or whatever it is, or there's a whole raft of antidepressants. Wellbutrin's another one. So there's those, and then there's the anti-anxiety drugs, which include benzodiazepines, which are GABA. They elicit the GABA, the inhibitory neurochemical GABA, again, which bring everything down. So now you can say, that's not addiction. That's medication. I'm not sure there's a big difference. I don't think there's such a big difference. When you're stuck on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety, you're kind of addicted to that. Now with the doctor's approval,
I heard about this study. I'm curious if you back it up or if it makes sense to you, that people who were suffering from major depression, some of them were given SSRIs, some of them were put into a regimen of movement of 5 times per week, 45 minutes for a month, and the control group wasn't given any of these.
I heard about this too.
And after 1 month, what they saw is that the people who are taking SSRIs and the people who are constantly having this practice of movement 5 times a week, 45 minutes, had an identical reduction in symptoms.
Yep.
Why does that make sense, or why would that happen?
Well, we've already covered the importance of being outside and contending with nature. But it's not only being in nature and interacting with the world, it's also feeling your body, your muscles, your energy, your strength, your movement, all that. There's a very, very clear connection between feeling your body and a kind of spiritual peacefulness that, this is me. I'm here, right in here. This is me. That's so precious, so precious.
Could you speak a little bit to IFS and why you chose this, why this worked for you, especially in working with addiction, even though we are here with the help of our friends from Compassionate Inquiry? It's not a competition. So
no, it's not.
I'm curious about your experience.
Yeah, in fact, as I pointed out in my talk yesterday, IFS and CI are good allies, good friends. Gabor Mate and Dick Schwartz. By the way, I just spent a week with Dick Schwartz.
In Oxford?
No, in Spain.
Okay.
We went on the Camino Trail. It was like a walking workshop. It was really fabulous. It was cool. There were about 30 of us and Schwartz and his partner, Gene, and every day we had demonstrations and workshop and questions and answers and co-meditating and you name it. And we were not each of us, but some of us took turns being the subject, the client, and Schwartz would be the therapist, and he went through his thing, just like
Sadaram.
Thank you,
At the conference, right?
You know, I have such a hard time with her name. Sadaram did yesterday on stage so beautifully. So he would do that with you. And I was the one on the last day.
Okay.
Chosen randomly. They would put they would throw a bunch of playing cards on the floor, and everybody pick a card. I picked a card that happened to be the Queen of Hearts. And so I was the one. And it was pretty intense. So to answer your question, I got into IFS because of my interest in helping people with addictions. IFS made the most sense to me. Why? Because IFS focuses, the main message is that we have different parts of our personality, and they are a little bit like individual entities, a little bit like little people inside of us. That's a sort of a cartoon image, but there's not really little people. But in different states, we have different moods or different beliefs, different sub-personalities that seem to be activated. One of the ones that most people recognize is the internal critic, the judge, the critic. You idiot, you asshole, how can you do that? I can't believe it. Oh my God, you're doing it again. You failure, you idiot. Yes, everybody has some of that, right? Yeah. But addicts have it the worst because addiction is so shameful. And I mean that exactly, shameful. It's full of shame, and it elicits shame from other people and from the self. So which part of the self? That's the part, that internal critic. And the other part is the part that says, I'm not going to listen to you, shut up, go away, I just want to get high. So we call that the firefighter. Why? Because like a firefighter, you turn on the water, you put out the fire. And the fire is the feelings of anxiety and shame, the hurtful, painful feelings. You put them out, you blanket them one way or the other. Opiates just blanket them like that, put them, soften them. Whereas psychostimulants like cocaine and meth take care of them in a different way by making you feel powerful, so you can just push right through it, I suppose, and feel that coherence and strength. Either way, that part of you seems to say, I know how to feel better, quick and dirty, do it right now. And that part of us doesn't have a sense of time. This was the subject of my talk yesterday. That part of you is reactive, not proactive, reactive. That part of you just says, I want to feel better now. And that's all I am focused on. And the critical part that says, what about tomorrow? What about tonight? What about when you get home? That part, you say, be quiet. I'm not going to listen to you. So in that respect, it really is like we have different parts, different sub-personalities, and they are very often polarized. And in addiction, there's classic polarization between the critical, judgmental, shaming part and the part that says, leave me alone, I need to feel better.
Okay, and in this frame of looking at things, we have the internal critic, we have the firefighter.
Yes.
What happens next towards healing? Like, how do you work with them?
How do you work with them? Well, in IFS, like in compassionate inquiry, the main engine of change is a feeling of compassion and care that comes from inside. And it's hard to describe, partly because it's different for different people. But it's not that different. It feels like accepting, present, whole, and compassionate, forgiving. I care about you. Well, you can actually talk to your parts. What a cool idea. I think, Schwartz really got a very, very brilliant insight that way. We can talk to the parts of us that feel that have certain tendencies, reactions, needs, and we can talk and say, hey, listen, I'm here with you. It's okay. I get you. I understand you. Well, you don't need as much from other people if you can give that much to yourself. And that's kind of the magic, I think, in both kinds of therapy.
This idea of strengthening the self, that part of you that's always healthy and regardless of what you're experiencing remains like a sort of internal light that can calm down or heal the other parts.
Yes, and it is like that. It's like an internal light. And people who feel more inclined towards a spiritual sense of the world, they see it as something like soul or God, can be. In Buddhism, which I'm sort of close to in my own self, I like the Buddhist idea. It feels like acceptance. It feels like process. It feels like being right here, right now. And in that place, you don't have motives and you don't have drives and you don't have needs. You don't have wishes. All you have is presence. But then you can use that presence to take care of the parts that do have needs, that do have motives, that do have, shall we say, actions, always actions. I need to take drugs. No, you don't. I'm with you. It's okay.
I want to ask you something about this idea of the here and now. We at the beginning of our conversation, we started with this idea that what we're aiming for is to change the way we feel.
Yeah.
When we're going for a substance or something. So feelings are in the here and now.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing in the Buddhist approach or in IFS, you're focusing on helping the client or helping yourself be in an accepting space in the here and now. So in both cases, we're talking about the here and now.
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit more to this? Because in my mind, there's a little bit of a confusion or contrast or conflict. I don't know exactly how to put it. Like, I'm trying to escape what I'm feeling in the here and now when I go towards weed or smoking or alcohol or cocaine or something.
Yeah.
But it seems that on the path to healing, I also need to learn to stay with what's in the here and now. So,
yes, because the problem with when you take drug substances or whatever it is or watch porn, it doesn't work that well because the here and now keeps sucking you back in. The here and now is here and now. That's the problem, right? So you try to get away from the here and now, and it doesn't really work for very long. It just, it's another here and now. I mean, I'm not a meditation teacher, but I do meditate, and meditation is a very good way to be present, just right here and now. And we often do it we start by focusing on our breathing, because that really puts you inside your body. Oh, I'm in and out, and I'm feeling yourself expand and contract, and then feeling the rest of your insides. And that's a very useful way to become present. So when you are in self, we call it in self, then we often start by breathing. I get my clients to breathe. Really breathe. No, really breathe. Come on, you can do it. And they start to breathe, and they say, oh, yeah. And how do you feel? I feel better. And so that's where it starts, that feeling of self-acceptance, self-care, self-compassion. Starts with being aware in your body, not having to get out of it. It's pretty hard to get out of your body, right?
But I believe it's what a lot of people are trying to do.
Yeah.
I have, for example, I think I spoke with almost everybody about this case study because it's close to me and it's important for me. For example, my father, his dad died when he was 5. He wasn't able to process anything of what happened then. I've never seen him expressing anything but anger, never fear, never sadness, never anything like that. He moved to the upper floors of his body like he lives in his head. Yeah. Engineer, logic from A to B, things that are predictable, that are certain, that are linear, that are in a way disconnected from feeling.
Yes.
Doesn't take care of his body in any way, like no sports, no movement, no care, a lot of smoking. And even though he's still living in his body, he's still alive and he's inhabiting his physical body.
Yes.
Looking at him, and it's not only him, I can see that he basically moved in his head. He disembodied in a metaphorical way.
Yes.
And from what I understand, we're doing this when we're in pain, because in order to feel whatever we're needing to feel, we have to be embodied.
Yes.
So one way of escaping is to not be connected to your body anymore.
Yes.
But the way to heal, from what you're saying, is to reconnect with the body.
Yes.
And feel all that pain.
Yes.
And in this process, in your experience or in your patient's experience, how can somebody titrate or, I don't know, manage the amount of pain? Because, for example, I'm thinking of my dad, who's 66 now. And I can't imagine how it would be for him to face tens of years of sadness and grief and loss at this age, with the amount of resources, mental, emotional, spiritual. He doesn't believe in God.
Yeah.
So no resources there, or any other form of spiritual beliefs, as far as I know.
Yeah.
How can somebody process all of that pain, especially later in life? Because maybe if you're 15 or 16 or 20 or 25, the bag has less content in it.
I understand.
Yeah.
How do I answer that? I mean, if you're in therapy and if it's a good relationship, the therapist will help you to go bit by bit. So it's a little more gradual. So it's not like a sudden tidal wave of pain. Oh my God. But rather helping you to feel safe with some pain. You can feel some pain and it's not going to kill you. And it's not going to send you over the cliff. So there's that. Also, I happen to have a pretty bad year this past year. And I'm 74. I'm pretty old. So, and my relationship with my wife of 28 years broke up last November. However, it was a good breakup, so to speak. Painful, very painful at first, but we have now become really good friends, really loving friends. Apparently that happens more often than people think. People can kind of reorganize their connection with each other. So that happened. I've had some other difficulties in the past year. I've been carrying a lot of pain. I also had a kind of a breakup with my daughter, which was pretty painful for me after many years. And I don't know what the hell happened there. I still can't figure it out. Carrying this, carrying that, breakup of the house. The kids went away to university. A lot of shit happened. One of my kids brought back a scabies infection from the youth hostels. And my brother, the doctor, the MD, my brother is a doctor, said it was the worst scabies infection he has ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was covered with itchiness for like 3 or 4 months at the end of all this other crap, emotional, physical. It was really bad. And yet, it's like I thought, and every day I wake up and say, okay, here comes all this pain, and then it's okay, I'm here, and let it come. And there is that feeling of being in self, using my IFS tools to be in self, to be there with my painful parts, my little kid part that feels scared, awful, alone, crappy, nobody loves me, and my scolding parts, it's all your fault, and other parts as well. And using these tools to be present, it's amazing how you can just get through the pain. You don't have to avoid it. You can just say, bring it on. And then there you are. And then on the other side of it, you feel really good because you're not hiding anything from yourself anymore. So I've actually been in a very good mood the last few months after a very crappy year.
Wow.
So you can do it when you're old. Yes.
Could you share some daily practices or weekly practices? Because I can see you're in a good vibe, and thank you for being here in Romania and being with us in this podcast. And I can feel that it's authentic. It's not something you just say.
Yeah.
But I'm curious for the people who are watching, for me, for my dad, like, what do you do specifically daily, especially in that context and milieu that you shared.
And part of, by the way, this crappy year is also recognizing, I look in the mirror and I say, who's that old man, right? I mean, being old is already a huge challenge. Oh my God, now I'm old. Now I'm going to lose function. Then I'm going to get sick. Then I'm going to die. That's not very encouraging. But it's all real. It's all true. And you don't have to escape it. What do?
Yeah.
I start off, I do a little bit of meditation, not a huge amount, 10 or 15 minutes. My breathing, present in my body, feel the inside. And I connect it with my IFS tools, which means that I pull into self, what we call capital S self, what Gabor calls, what does he call it? Self, sort of like that.
Something like that.
This internal compassionate place, and take care of all my fears, my concerns, my needs, my angers. I'm here. We're together. I'm here. It is, we call it internal family systems because it is like an internal family. And I actually talk to my parts. And sometimes I make it into a cartoon, a kind of a joke. I say, all right, you guys, who's first?
And you do this alone at home?
I do it alone every day.
Closing your eyes?
Or not.
Or not. Okay. So over time for you, I can imagine it became so easy to practice that it's easy for you to connect with the parts.
I've made it into a habit. So it's like a personal habit. I do that. I also do some Tai Chi. So I take care of my body.
Some form of movement. Tai Chi.
Some form of movement. Okay. And that's what I do. Like 20 minutes of this and 20 minutes of that, and I'm good to go.
Okay.
It's a daily practice.
So I'm happy. I think somebody was sharing this at the conference also, to keep it simple.
Yeah. I mean, but that's a lot. It is simple. But you're not hiding it from anything. And then it makes the complexity simple.
Mm-hmm. And the consistency of it, I understand it's important. The fact that you do it daily.
I think so.
Even if it's meditation, connecting to yourself and taking care of the parts and some Tai Chi, some movement, but you do it daily.
I miss a few days sometimes, especially traveling, but that's okay. It's mostly, on most days I do it. Mm-hmm. So it is a habit, And there's a way we all talk to ourselves. I mean, I think most people recognize that. There's some kind of internal dialogue going on. Well, when you do this kind of stuff, meditation and something like IFS, you're talking to yourself in a way that's conscious and compassionate and caring and supportive. And you can do all that right in here. So you don't really, and I actually have a pretty decent social life. And my now ex-wife and I are actually really good friends. We check in with each other a lot. So I have a social life, but I also have an internal life that feels whole.
Excellent. You're speaking to the idea of introverted, extroverted, and being both.
Yeah.
I want to, going towards the final part of the conversation, I want to use your neuroscience expertise and also the fact that you've been doing therapy and also your life experience in speaking a little bit to this idea of building or breaking habits. Because both in the addiction part, I understand how important the striatum is and how important its role in creating habits is, but also in breaking a bad pattern of behavior, maybe an addiction or not. Yeah. So in 2025, with your understanding and your professional background, what would be the steps in building good habits and what would be the steps in breaking bad habits? There's this idea of 21 days and stuff like that. I'd like an update on that and the actual neuroscience informed perspective.
I don't read very many self-help books these days. I'm actually writing another book, but it's not really self-help. It's sort of trying to understand it all. But I mean, breaking bad habits and acquiring good habits are not really two different things. They're really just one thing. Right? So one way to help break bad habits like addiction, which is obviously a bad habit, is to find a replacement. That's the first simple thing. Replacement means that most of my clients in therapy are most vulnerable at the end of the day. They get home from work at 6 o'clock, whatever it is, and then they feel like a drink or whatever, a smoke, whatever it is. And so what can you do right then that helps you get just around that so that you can come back in and have a nice dinner, whatever it is, and whatever you want to do at night, read a book, watch Netflix, whatever, or chat. And the replacement really is pretty important for breaking through that conditioning of, oh, it's the end of the day, I got to do something. So you want to break through that period of maybe an hour of vulnerability, replacing one with another.
Question. When you're saying breaking through it, let's take a concrete example. So you have a patient or you have somebody who comes home and they're used to either drinking or smoking, maybe cigarettes or cannabis or something. And the craving appears. It's like my reward after a hard day or a stressful day or something like that.
Yes.
And I observe it. The first part is for me to become aware that I'm doing this, that I need this, that I want this.
Yeah.
But then when you're saying to choose to reward myself with something different, what happens if in my mind or if in my body I feel that that's the only thing I want? Like I'm watching Netflix or I'm doing something else that's fun, but a part of my mind is, but I'd really like a smoke with this.
So that happens a lot.
I know.
Right? Yes. Yeah. It's very common, and obviously, I'm not saying it's simple, easy, but it is certainly possible. People do it. I find that the tools of IFS are very helpful because the way we put it in IFS is what gets activated at those times is this manager's critical voice saying, you better not again tonight. Oh my God, for the last 5 nights you've done whatever. So you want to talk with that voice. You want to say, hey, I'm with you. Now, what does that mean? How can you say to a part of yourself, I'm with you? Sounds stupid.
And how does it feel?
How does it feel?
Yeah.
Because the way it feels is, how does it feel? It feels accepting. I mean, just going back to the same words, accepting, compassionate, caring. You're turning on something. Maybe it's love. Maybe that's simple. You're just turning on some kind of self-love. You're loving the parts that are distressed, that are feeling uneasy, that are feeling, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to make the change by myself. I do this all the time, Hey, it's okay. We're together. Now, I mean, again, it sounds crazy to say no, good.
No.
To say I'm together with myself. Well, but it is exactly how it feels. It's exactly how it feels. So IFS provides tools for that. Tools meaning to say habits, ways of doing it, procedures, little things you do with your therapist. There's a way in. Start by breathing, become aware, recognize, actually I feel okay, not too bad. It's not so stressful. Being home tonight, there's nobody here. I'm all alone. Well, but you know what? There's all kinds of really cool podcasts that I have need to catch up on. This is no doubt one of them. and so there's a lot of stuff to do. And when you feel that kind of slowing down of the compulsion and relaxing into the moment and saying, I can do this in a way that is caring, connected, and loving, it changes everything. It just allows a lot more flexibility. And then there's room to find new habits, to build new habits.
If I'm able to go for a different reward, so it's the same evening.
Yeah.
Some evenings I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
While in other evenings I'm not.
But so what?
That was the question. Because from my understanding of the neuroscience of building new habits or changing old ones, consistency, doing it day after day after day after day after day is really important.
Yeah.
If you break the pattern, it's not like everything you've done equals 0.
Right.
But it's important, I would guess, to do it more often than not.
Yes.
Like for the new highway, let's say, to be more, to have more traffic, to send more energy on that highway.
For sure.
Than on the old one.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's useful that you're confirming that, because that doesn't say, okay, I did it 2 days, I relapsed 1 day, then I did it 3 days.
No, but that's only part of it. The other part is that the old habit just doesn't feel as good anymore.
Okay.
Not only is it boring,
As satisfying, as
yeah,
satiating.
yeah. Like, I don't do drugs anymore, very often anyway, but it's like I still like to have a glass or two of wine or some other, I like scotch, but one or two is enough. And if I drink any more than that, it doesn't feel great. And sometimes I don't even like the feeling when I even drink one. It's like, I actually felt better before I had this glass of wine. So that's interesting. That means the habits are not stuck. They're not exactly precise replicas forever. They can change. They can modify. That's important.
We talked a lot about the importance of being connected to yourself and the self's role in everything.
Yeah.
Do you believe that healing from whatever, may it be addiction or trauma or whatever, is possible without having the feeling of self-love?
That's a tough question. I'm not so sure it is. I think without that feeling of self-love or self-compassion, which Gabor obviously emphasizes as well, it's really quite difficult because then it's an intellectual exercise. Then it's like what you described as your father. It becomes linear, logical, just fixing up the machinery. And that's very different. You can do it. You can get away with it. And people do. One thing in IFS, we often refer to the one part which is called the Exile, right? Which is not the manager and it's not the firefighter. It's the little kid inside. And sometimes we find that he doesn't change very much. Even with therapy, even with life, he's still scared, he's still ashamed. And it's really weird because when you go in there, you can say, wow, you still feel like 4 years old. Like, what happened? Like, didn't you go? We grew up since then, We're a lot older now. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Still feels the same to me. So what am I saying? I'm saying that needs to change. And if you do it without self-love, you're not really getting all the way in there. That little guy is still going to be scared and shamed and feel like I need to hide. So it feels different.
And in order to connect to this little guy.
Yeah.
Because from what you're saying, I understand that that's the only way to be able to feel self-love is to be able to connect to that instance of an implicit memory or wherever it may reside.
Yeah, it's a way in, yeah.
To be able to... What would you say or what advice do you have or what approach should people have that have difficulties in connecting to their inner child? I'm speaking from personal experience. For me, in therapy and in my personal practice of trying to heal or develop, it was most difficult to actually, when I close my eyes and do guided meditation or guided inner work, to be able to actually feel my inner child, not see him, but feel
him. Yes. Yeah.
How can people... I would be brave and say, how could my dad do that at 66 if he never tried to connect with his inner child?
This is the challenge in therapy. Yes, you're right. That's a good question. It's a difficult one. I think one way to do it is to go back to scenarios, go back to very specific incidents, events. I had an event when my mother was very volatile. She would be very cuddly and warm sometimes, and other times she'd get super angry. Exactly. Wash my mouth out with soap. One time my underwear was a little bit brown inside, and she rubbed it on my nose. Awful. I was 4 years old. That happened. It really happened. Then I went and hid under the table. And in a way, that part of me is still hiding under the table. So I go back to that. Say, what was that like? How did that feel? Oh my God. So that's kind of brave, going right there.
Yeah.
How could she do that? Well, she was pretty freaked out. I mean, she obviously had her problems growing up in a family that was emphasizing cleanliness, I guess, control. But you can do it. And then that kid feels, oh, you get me. You're there. I'm not all alone in this. That is huge. That is a huge moment. That's a huge moment. Then you're not just hiding under the table alone. Say, yeah, I see you. I'm there. I get it. You can come out now.
And for the people who don't have conscious memories of those moments because of cortisol blocking explicit memory and whatever, would it be helpful to look at pictures from when they were small or revisit that environment or to try to ramp up those memory systems and for the connections to reappear?
The only reason, it's so funny, but shameful events I find with myself and with my clients have this engram. It's like some of these memories remain absolutely crystal clear, even though everything else is blurry. What is it about shame that crystallizes these particular events? I have one from when I was like 12 or something, and I won't get into it, but it's like still crystal clear in my mind. So yeah, if you don't find it without it, you can use photographs to take you right back there. And then it's kind of magical. It's like Wizard of Oz. It's like from black and white to color, right? It's like, this is what it felt like to be 4 or to be 8 or to be in school when you were kicked out of class because, you were talking to the kid next to you, whatever. This is what it felt like. Oh, this is what it felt like. And then you're really there. And if photos can help, yeah, sure. But usually it's not that far away.
Once you're open to going there.
Yeah, there's a bit of a leap.
Thank you very much. I want to go towards the ending questions that I asked of everybody who was part of this series, and I'm really curious on how you look at them. So speaking about imagination and magic, if you had a magic wand that could make all people suffering from addiction feel one thing that would help them heal, what would be that one thing?
Well, what we've heard a lot in the last 2 days in the conference and in CI in general is that you are not the only one. It's not just you. It's everyone around you is kind of almost in the same place in one way or another. And also, we live in a culture which is somewhat twisted. The culture itself, living in our little boxes, alone in your apartment. Oh, now I'm grown up. I'm 21 years old. I graduated, whatever. Now I can be in my own little one-bedroom apartment and spend most of my money on rent. That's not your fault. Right? The culture's kind of fucked up. And recognizing that, just recognizing that it's not your fault. It's big. It's kind of
like
big.
Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
It's like that.
Okay. Now, if you could change one thing with this magic wand in the childhood of each person on the planet in order to lower the chance that they would ever get addicted, what would you change?
I don't know. Well, we know that prohibition doesn't work because whatever you forbid from the legal market gets made up in the black market. So we know that. So that doesn't work. You can say connection. Well, what is it about connection? Well, we still talk about connection like it's something that, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, yes, we could try that. It shouldn't be that novel an idea, right? It should be something that we learn in grade school. There should be some kind of education where it's built in this idea. We need to be there for each other, to understand each other, to feel some sympathy and care. Kids are so competitive, bullying and competition and wanting to. I know it's so built in. It's built into all of us. So recognizing that and saying, but still we can connect. Still we can understand each other. Still we can be together. That would be so great if we could somehow build that into the way we learn to be humans in the culture that we live in.
And one last one, going a little bit more zoom out and in the theme of the Reconnect conference. If you had the power to pass one universal law that everybody would obey and respect, what would that be?
Well, when it comes to addiction, stop punishing. Stop punishing. People who have problems with addiction don't need to be punished. They don't need to be shamed. Just stop it. It should be against the law. Don't do it. Does that make sense?
Completely. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
From the bottom of my
It's been
heart.
a pleasure.
I'm looking at the audience. I hope you've been with us until the end. Such a wonderful mind and a kind soul. And thank you for being back in Romania, full circle in a way with the
Yes, it has been
with
my family,
life partner and family. Yeah. Thank you again, Marc, for everything. You have here Marc's book in Romanian. You have it also in English. You also have Memories of an Addicted Brain, and we're gonna have a new one.
Yeah.
If you want to say a few things about it, please. If not, it's going to be a surprise when it comes out.
The working title is The Voices in Our Heads. So going out from addiction and trying to have a larger model of what is going on in here with all these different voices. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But Paul, thank you also. What a great conversation. Thank you for the intelligence of your questions and your honesty and connection.
Thank you so much for everything.
Okay.
See you soon, guys, and be well. Up until then, be well and stay healthy. Acesta este un material gratuit prin care echipa Mind Architect contribuie la dezvoltarea personală și la cunoașterea de sine fundamentate în știință. Dacă vrei să aprofundezi subiectul pe care tocmai l-ai ascultat, devină și tu membru Mind Architect Premium, unde ai acces la peste 130 de materiale audio-video, rezumate infografice și recomandări de resurse. În plus, și poate cel mai important, întâlnirile MA Live, unde poți intra în direct cu echipa noastră pe teme care te interesează. Și acces la grupul de Facebook privat, unde ținem aproape de comunitatea abonaților. Iar dacă vrei să înveți în ritmul tău, te așteptăm pe mindarchitect.ro în secțiunea Online Academy, unde te așteaptă cursuri certificate, cu informație clar organizată, cu suport vizual excelent, teste și studii de caz. Poți asculta în continuare gratuit episoadele de podcast Mind Architect pe rețelele de podcasting precum Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube și pe mindarchitect.ro. Iar dacă ți-a plăcut acest episod și crezi că i-ar face viața mai bună cuiva cunoscut, ne-am bucurat tare să ne ajuți cu un share. Conținutul Mind Architect nu este destinat și nici nu trebuie interpretat ca fiind utilizabil pentru a diagnostica, trata, atenua, vindeca, preveni sau un alt mod a fi utilizat pentru orice boală sau condiție medicală. Nu reprezintă substitut pentru consultație psihologică sau pentru muncă terapeutică.